The city code says that in 1995, the good old boys got together and passed an ordinance that said when the city's population reached 250,000 people, they would give out one more pond license. Rick Harrison's life after Pawn Stars has been full of problems and heartbreak. As a child, he lost his sister and had seizures, spending a lot of time alone with books. Later, his parents' business failed, and he had to become a father early on. He also had financial problems and 2 failed marriages. Even after finding fame, he lost his father and got into legal battles with his mother over the pawn shop. Tune in to find out the shocking turns in his life and what the future may hold. Rick Harrison was born on March 22, 1965, to Richard and Joanne Harrison. He was one of 4 children and grew up in a busy home. Unfortunately, his older sister Sherry Joanne died, leaving a hole in the family that never really healed. As if that wasn't bad enough, he started having them with reading. By the time he was 8 years old, he was having seizures that kept him in bed a lot. Reading became his escape, and he fell in love with a series called The Great Brain. He would always love stories about clever schemes and historical events. "This is an amazing collection. You just never see stuff like this. It scares the hell out of me," he said. "Fake money and Secret Service credentials are the kind of things that can get me in hot water." But Rick didn't know the turns that were coming. Like the adventures in his favorite books, Rick's life kept throwing him problems as he grew up. When he was in high school, his parents' real estate business went bankrupt, and money was tight. Rick stepped up to help in his own way. When he was 17, his girlfriend Kim got pregnant, and their first baby didn't make it. Soon after, in April 1985, they welcomed their son Corey into the world. Despite their best efforts to build a life together, Rick and Kim broke up. Within a year, they broke up. He married Tracy, who helped him raise Corey and later his second son Adam. At this point, Rick was fully involved in the world of pawning. His dad Richard decided to open a coin shop in Las Vegas, and Rick was all for it. He had a knack for making people feel like they were buying more than just stuff. He gave everything a story. For example, he had a Secret Service ID for J. Howard McGrath, who was Attorney General of the United States, and he had letters signed by J. Hoover and Heber Humphrey. This skill made their pay. To make ends meet, he got a side job taking back cars. Imagine the stress of juggling a family, a shop, and a job where people aren't happy to see you show up. After some hard years, Rick and his dad finally opened the gold and silver pawn shop in 1989. It wasn't an instant hit, because the pawn shop business had a lot of rules, like limiting licenses based on the number of people living in the area. They had to wait until Las Vegas hit 250,000 people before they could open their doors. Million people before they could even apply for one. Once they got the go-ahead, they started out by specializing in rare sports memorabilia and historical items. But they quickly learned that jewelry was where the real money was. Then came the big break. In 2008, TV producers Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines visited Las Vegas and thought that a pawn shop with its unique vibe would make a great reality show. Rick's dream of being on Pawn Stars came true, but behind the success, Rick's personal life was falling apart. Even though he fell in love again with Deanna, their marriage also ended in divorce. Things didn't get any better when he lost his father, Richard, who was known as the Old Man on the show. His death was a huge blow to him personally and professionally, as he became the only person in charge of the family's business. As if the pandemic wasn't bad enough, Rick's family problems made the news again when his mother Joanne sued him, saying he mishandled her share of the pawn shop's profits. She said he had gotten her to give up 51% ownership of the shop while she was still recovering from a coma. The lawsuit painted a messy picture of a family torn apart by money and mistrust. Rick denied the accusations, but the damage to his reputation was already done. Despite everything, he was able to keep going with his son Corey and longtime friend Chumley. Rick even fell in love again and married Amanda Palmer, hoping for a fresh start. Whether he's running a business, being on TV, or dealing with personal problems, Rick's story shows that even success comes with its fair share of problems. Rick's childhood wasn't exactly picture perfect. His family's grief over losing Cher Joanne was made worse by his health problems. Those early years shaped his love of history, science, and strategy. As a child, he found comfort in reading and dreamed big about the future. He was interested in stories and finding hidden truths, which would later fuel his passion for running the shop as a teenager. He worked hard at selling fake Gucci bags and other jobs on the side, always looking for ways to make money. These experiences taught him the value of hard work and showed him how to see opportunities where others didn't. It's no surprise that he found his calling. Every item in the pawn business has a story waiting to be told. When Rick and his dad opened the gold and silver pawn shop, he was already feeling like an entrepreneur. The shop's early days were not glamorous. Rick and his dad worked long hours building their reputation, one customer at a time. Ibubu Kotiobu had always bought and sold things, Rick said. My dad had a little coin shop, and I wanted a pawn shop. They quickly learned that being in the pawn business meant dealing with all sorts of people. People came in looking for quick loans, and others wanted to sell treasures they didn't know were valuable. His ability to connect with people and share the history behind the items made the shop stand out. As the shop grew, so did his vision. He didn't just want to run a successful business, he wanted to make something iconic. His dream came true when Pawn Stars premiered, giving viewers an inside look at the world of pawning while also being entertaining. Each episode featured a different item. He loved history and collected everything from old coins to rare sports memorabilia, but fame came with problems. It wasn't easy to balance the needs of the show with the realities of running a business. He was often stretched thin trying to meet the expectations of fans while also running the day-to-day operations of the shop. Despite the stress, his commitment to his family and his business never wavered. Over the years, his personal life became as much a part of his story as the pawn shop itself. His marriages and his divorces, his role as a father and his relationship with his parents were all public events. The death of his father was especially hard because it marked the end of an era for the Harrison family. The old man had been a steady presence in both the shop and the show, and his absence left a void that was hard to fill. The pandemic tested Ed in ways he hadn't expected. With fewer customers and less money coming in, the shop had financial problems that many other businesses face. His willingness to change, like lowering interest rates and giving more flexible terms, showed that he cared about his community. He knew that the shop was more than just a business. It was a lifeline for many people in hard times. Even as he dealt with the effects of the pandemic, his mother's lawsuit made things even more complicated. The battle brought family problems into the open, raising questions about trust and loyalty for a man who had built his brand on the idea of. The allegations against him were a painful blow, but his strength shone through as he continued to face these problems with the same determination that had defined his career. Rick's journey begins with problems that had shaped him from the start. Sweet deals and candy dreams. Pawn Stars is all about making serious money off of weird and unique items. The show's quirky hosts have been drawing viewers in for years with their sharp tongues and offbeat personalities. But guess what? The guy Chum Lee, who everyone thinks is a bit of a jerk, is actually the richest person in the group. He was born Austin Lee Russell in Henderson, Nevada, in early September 1982. The friendly star is more than just the funny dude on TV. His journey from a kid who liked collecting weird things to a reality TV star with a good business sense is full of interesting moments. Growing up in the glitzy chaos of Las Vegas, this entertainer probably got his knack for wheeling and dealing just by living in a place where hustling is normal. His dad was a disc jockey and his mom worked in a casino, two jobs that scream Las Vegas like a neon sign. The TV star learned how to trade and haggle when he was young. He worked at it long before the cameras started rolling. He and Corey Harrison, the son of the pawn shop's boss Rick Harrison, grew up hanging out at the store that would one day make them famous. The store opened in 1989 by Rick and his dad Richard, who everyone called the Old Man, and by the time they were teenagers, it was their regular haunt. When he was in his teens, the future businessman had already been helping out at the gold and silver pawn shop for about 5 years. He did the dirty work like cleaning up and running errands while learning the ins and outs of the business. When the idea of making the pawn shop into a reality show came up, it wasn't a sure thing that he would be the comedic relief. There were at least 10 other employees who could have taken that spot. But he had an edge because of his close friendship with Corey and how well they got along on camera. He wasn't trying to put on a show. He thought the best way to stand out was to just be himself. His laid-back, silly personality caught the attention of the producers, and soon he was a regular on the show. When Pawn Stars debuted on the History Channel in 2009, it became a huge hit, making the whole cast famous. I think the bear is about 50 years old, so I hope it's worth some money. I'm hoping to get you about $2,300. Suddenly, life was full of fame, money, and crazy opportunities. But don't let the easygoing persona fool you. The businessman was working hard behind the scenes. He started his own line of funny t-shirts, bobbleheads, and other items that sold like hotcakes. Rick Harrison, always had the savvy businessman, bought half of his company in 2010 for a cool $155,000. This made it easier to handle the huge number of orders from fans. The savvy entrepreneur wasn't just selling funny stuff with his face on it. He had bigger plans. In 2017, he opened a candy store on the boulevard, right across from the pawn shop. It was a smart move. People who came to the shop for candy could just cross the street for a fix. His brother Sage helped him run the business, and it did well. But opening a candy store wasn't easy. When he tried to open an online store, he found that someone had already bought all the good domain names, so he had to come up with a new plan. And then there was his health journey, which had its ups and downs. At one point he lost over 100 pounds by cutting out sugary foods. He cut out junk food and stuck to a strict diet, but it wasn't easy to keep the weight off. By 2016, he had gained back about 50 pounds. His weight continued to fluctuate until 2021, when he finally decided to get gastric sleeve surgery. After that, he was able to keep his weight steady at around 190 pounds, even though his personal life was going through a lot of ups and downs. The hustler stayed busy by becoming a disc jockey and even went to a real school to learn the trade. His first gig made headlines because a writer asked him to promote Girl Scout cookies. He also considered working as a talent scout for Las Vegas musicians. But things haven't always gone well for the reality star. In early 2016, police raided his home as part of an investigation into a sexual assault claim and found a stash of drugs and a whole arsenal of weapons. He was charged with 19 drug offenses and 1 weapons offense. The scandal did a lot of damage to his reputation, but he was able to get back on track. Later that year, he made a deal to plead guilty to a felony weapons charge and agree to 3 years of probation. The other charges were dropped to misdemeanors. Even though the scandal hurt his reputation, it did not end his career. Despite the scandal, the entrepreneur stayed active in business. His candy store did well, and he tried his hand at other ventures. One of his more unusual projects was making a retro. He successfully raised money for a style video game called Chum's Adventure: The Quest for Pinky, which was meant to be played on old Nintendo consoles. He also has a thing for cars. Over the years, the collector has built up an impressive collection that includes a Maserati and a Rolls-Royce Phantom. These aren't just toys, they're reminders of how far he has come since working in a pawn shop. On top of everything else, the entertainer has a soft spot for charity. In 2014, he helped raise money for autism research through an event. It's clear that even though he loves making money, he's not afraid to give back when it counts. Of course, his personal life has had its ups and downs as well. He met Olivia Rodin in 2013, and by 2018 they were engaged. The next year they married in a private ceremony, but by 2020 things seemed to have cooled off. They stopped posting pictures of themselves together online, and rumors started flying that they might be splitting up. But they still seemed to respect each other and liked each other's work. The star has also been very smart when it comes to real estate. In 2019, he sold his Las Vegas home for almost $1,400,000, which is a nice profit considering he bought it for just over $1 million 7 years before. The place was huge, with a main house, a guest house, and a pool fit for a rock star. Then the show came along and everything changed. In the late 2000s, before streaming took over the world, a little show called Pawn Stars popped up on History Channel. And it wasn't just about pawning old stuff. It was a gold mine for Rick Harrison and his crew. The show was based on the famous gold and silver pawn shop, which Rick ran with his dad Richard Benjamin Harrison, who everyone called the Old Man. This wasn't just a dusty corner store. It became a place to buy and sell weird historical items at sometimes ridiculously high prices. Rick Harrison was the brains behind the whole operation and had years of experience. He knew how to talk down people who were just looking to make quick cash. His specialty was knowing the story behind every strange item that came through the door, from old guitars and coins. Rick was smart and made sure the shop's cash register kept ringing. Then there was Corey Harrison, Rick's son, who didn't just get into business because of his last name. Corey, or Big Hoss, grew up around all this buying and selling, so he learned the ropes early on. He eventually became manager and oversaw the day-to-day operations and some of the shop's more important deals. He had a good eye for figuring out what was worth keeping and what should be left behind. Every good show needs a wild card, and that's where Austin "Chumble" Russell came in. He was hired to work the floor and quickly became a fan favorite. Sure, he was often the target of jokes for not knowing much about pinball machines and old-school toys, but don't let that fool you. Chumble fans loved his goofy charm and the right amount of humor to keep things interesting. Of course, the old man Richard Harrison was there from the beginning, keeping everyone in line with his straightforward attitude. He had been in the business for a long time, long before reality TV came along, and he knew the pawn game inside and out. Until he died in 2018, he was the shop's steady hand, always ready with a deadpan remark or a skeptical eye when something fishy happened. What made Pawn Stars different from other reality shows was, customers always brought in weird, unusual, and quirky things, but Rick and his team didn't just guess what something was worth. They had a team of experts who made sure they weren't getting ripped off. For example, Danny Coker, who knew everything there was to know about cars and motorcycles, would stop by when someone brought in a vintage ride. This is a Leslie Model 145 organ speaker. This thing looks like it would do some damage in my trunk, ch. It's a little bit. He later went on to star in his own show, Counting Cars, but he stayed a familiar face at the pawn shop. When old books came in, they called Rebecca Romney. She was the expert on rare books and manuscripts and helped the shop figure out if a dusty-looking book was worth a small fortune or just a nice decoration for a bookshelf. And don't forget to get Steve Grad, the autograph expert, whenever someone walked in saying they had baseball or Hollywood stars' autographs to sign. Steve was the one who made sure those autographs were real. As the years went by, the show not only stayed popular, it became a full-blown phenomenon. By 2016, Rick, Corey, and Chumlee were making around $25,000 per episode, which was a great deal considering how many episodes they filmed each season. With their fame came even more money from side jobs like endorsements and appearances. They were no longer just running a pawn shop, they were running a brand. The show focused a lot on Olani. A big part of the show's appeal came from the relationships between the actors. Rick's direct style, Corey's more laid-back attitude, Chumlee's antics, and the old man's rough but wise personality made for a mix that viewers couldn't get enough of. They watched not only to see what crazy things someone would try to sell, but also to see how this family and their friends work together and sometimes bump heads while running a business. As of January 2025, the shop is still open for business. Rick is still in charge, Corey is in charge of the big deals, and Chumlee is doing his thing to keep things light and funny. Fans keep coming back because of the mix of historical oddities and familiar faces they have been watching for over a decade. Pawn Stars made its own place in reality TV history. It wasn't flashy or over the top like some other shows. It was all about the thrill of the deal, the lure of a hidden treasure, and the people who made it happen. He was good at talking down people who were just looking to make quick cash. His specialty was knowing the story behind every strange item that came through the door, from old guitars to coins from ancient times. Rick was smart and made sure the shop's cash register kept ringing. Then there was Corey Harrison, Rick's son, who didn't just work in the business because his last name was Harrison. He grew up around all the buying and selling, so he learned the ropes early on. Eventually, he took over as manager and ran the day-to-day operations. When it came to some of the shop's more important deals, he had a good eye for what to keep and what to leave behind. Every good show needs a wild card, and that's where Austin Chumlee Russell came in. He was hired to work the floor and quickly became a fan favorite. Sure, he was often the target of jokes for not knowing much about pinball machines and old-school toys, but Chumlee knew what he was talking about. Fans loved his goofy charm and thought he added just the right amount of humor to keep things interesting. And of course, the shop's steady hand, Richard Harrison, was there from the beginning with his no-nonsense attitude. He had been in the business for a long time, long before reality TV, so he knew the pawn game inside and out. Until his death in 2018, he was the shop's steady hand, always ready with a deadpan comment or a skeptical eye when something fishy showed up. What made Pawn Stars different from other reality shows was the constant flow of weird, rare, and downright weird items that customers bought. Rick and his team didn't just guess what things were worth. They had a group of experts who made sure they weren't getting ripped off. For example, Danny Coker, who knew everything there was to know about cars and motorcycles, would stop by when someone brought in an old ride and say, "This is a Leslie Model 145 organ speaker. This thing looks like it would do some damage in my trunk, ch. It's a little too big for your car. The bigger the better, like Dumb leading the Dumb." Danny Coker later went on to have his own show, Counting Cars, but he was always a familiar face at the pawn shop. When old books came in, they called Rebecca Romney, who was an expert on rare books and manuscripts, and helped the shop decide if a dusty-looking book was worth a small fortune or was just a nice decoration for a bookshelf. And let's not forget Steve Grad, who was the autograph expert. If someone came in saying they had a signed baseball or some Hollywood memorabilia, Steve was the one who made sure the signatures were real. As the years went on, the show didn't end. According to reports, Rick, Corey, and Chumlee were making around $25,000 per episode by 2016. That was a great deal considering how many episodes they filmed each season, and with the fame came even more money from side businesses, endorsements, and appearances. They weren't just running a pawn shop anymore, they were running a brand. While the show was mostly about haggling and the things that were hidden behind the items, a big part of its appeal came from the relationships between the cast. Rick's straightforwardness made people like him. People couldn't get enough of the old man's rough but wise personality. Corey's more laid-back style, Chumlee's antics, and the shop's crazy items for sale. They watched to see how the family and their friends worked together, and sometimes clashed while running a business. As of January 2025, the shop is still open for business and the cameras are still rolling. Rick is still in charge, Corey is in charge of the big purchases, and Chumlee is doing his thing. Over a decade of fans coming back for more of Pawn Stars' mix of historical oddities and familiar faces made it a one-of-a-kind reality TV show. It wasn't flashy or over the top like some other shows. It was all about the thrill of the deal, the lure of a hidden treasure, and the people who made it happen. At the center of it all was the Harrison family, who turned what could have been just another pawn shop into a cultural icon. And through it all, before anything else, one thing was clear. This show was what propelled Rick and his family to fame and wealth. It wasn't just the main cast that kept people watching. The people who came into the shop with their strange items also played a big part in keeping things interesting. You never knew what would come in next. One day it might be a sword from the Civil War, the next day a vintage jukebox, or even something as strange as a shrunken head. And fans loved that. Rick was good at making even the simplest deal memorable. He always wanted to know the story behind an item, and that's what made the show unique. It wasn't just about making money. It was about finding the history hidden in everyday objects, like an old pocket watch or a gun. Rick made sure that viewers learned something new with every episode, and the experts who appeared on the show became well known. For example, when it came to weapons, they often called in Sean. Rich was knowledgeable about old guns and swords, and helped the shop figure out if a weapon was real or just a fancy copy. For old toys, Johnny Jimenez was the expert. He helped the shop figure out if an old toy car or action figure was worth a lot of money or just a childhood relic. And it wasn't just about valuing the items. The negotiation process was an important part of the show. A buy a tag, it has the ear tag like every sty ever made has. I heard of Stife before, but what's so special about him? I started making teddy bears. Customers often came in with unrealistic ideas about how much their item was worth, only to be slapped back to reality by Rick's tough bargaining. Fans made fun of Rick's famous line about how he had to make a profit, but it was true that the shop wasn't a charity, it was a business. And Rick knew how to keep it going. Corey had a different style when he negotiated than Rick did. Rick was more direct, while Corey was more laid back. He knew when to push and when to getting people to back off made him a great negotiator in his own right. Chumley, on the other hand, wasn't exactly known for his bargaining skills, but every once in a while he would surprise everyone by pulling off a great deal behind the scenes. When Pawn Stars became a hit, the shop became a tourist attraction. People came from all over the world hoping to see the cast or even get on the show. The extra foot traffic was good for business, and it also gave the cast members got to meet their fans, but fame also came with problems. Over the years there were a few controversies and personal struggles that made the news. Chumley in particular had some legal problems that brought unwanted attention to the show, but he was able to move on and the show kept going without a hitch. The cast's ability to stay professional and keep the show going even though they had personal setbacks was a testament to how dedicated they were. The shop itself changed over time. What started as this small business grew into a much bigger one, so they added more display cases and hired more staff to handle the extra work. The shop changed to handle not only pawning and selling, but also the needs of being on TV. Despite the changes, it was still a family-run business at its core. Over the years, Pawn Stars has inspired a number of other shows. For example, some of the experts who appeared on Pawn Stars have been on American Restoration and Counting Cars. Each had its own appeal, but none of them quite captured the magic of the original Pawn Stars. Even as new reality shows came and went, Pawn Stars kept going strong. Its mix of history, humor, and haggling proved to be a winning formula. The show stayed fresh by always adding new items and keeping the focus on the personalities that fans had grown to love. As the show's later seasons began, it started to feel like a cultural phenomenon, and the cast members became... Even though they were famous and went to events and even sold their own stuff, they stayed grounded and kept running the shop and filming new episodes. What made Pawn Stars work was that it felt real. Even though it was a reality show, it never felt overly scripted or fake. The interactions between the cast members felt real, and the items that came into the shop were real pieces of history. This realness struck a chord with viewers, making Pawn Stars stand out in a crowded field of reality shows. Pawn Stars kept people watching for years, but one question remains: was it the show's authenticity or its clever editing that kept people watching? Like, share, and don't forget to subscribe.